The federal Liberals are challenging the provinces to meet their terms to build what they call missing middle homes. If not, new money allocated to address Canada's housing crunch could go straight to municipalities. Today, the Liberals announced $6 billion is going towards a Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund. $5 billion of that goes to provinces and territories to build more duplexes, triplexes, and townhouses, and $1 billion to municipalities for urgent infrastructure needs. Meanwhile, the Premier of Canada's most populous province is putting a wedge in those plans as Doug Ford ruled out fourplexes, rejecting a key pillar of the missing middle approach. So, how will the Liberals actually meet their promise of building more homes faster? For more on this, I'm joined now by Housing Minister Sean Fraser from Halifax. Minister, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So the provinces have said they wanted a seat at the table with you on federal housing deals, and today you laid out some table stakes that Ontario has already rejected, such as fourplexes right of way. How are you going to get past the objection of Premier Doug Ford on this plan?
Well, first of all, the measures that we're putting in place are not specific to any one province. We actually published a list of best practices for cities to examine during the rollout of the Housing Accelerator Fund to lay out what we think communities can do to make it easier to build homes more quickly, to get them built at a price people can actually afford. When Premier Ford made his comments recently, perhaps he wasn't weighing in the balance access to a $5 billion fund to help build out infrastructure to support housing growth. My own view is that we got to make it easy for people to build homes. One way we can do that is by saying a person who owns a piece of property is actually free to build homes for their neighbors during a housing crisis. I don't think it has to be that controversial an idea to incentivize gentle density with federal funding. And my hope is the government in Ontario and in every other province will realize that this is an opportunity to solve the housing crisis rather than just tinker around the margins.
So the carrot there is $5 billion for the provinces that get on board. And I guess the stick is that if they don't do it, the money flows around them and it goes to the cities and towns and municipalities of their province that are willing to meet these conditions. Have you had any feedback from premiers yet? I mean, how do you think this will be received?
Look, different provinces will react in different ways. There's already, if I take the provincial government of British Columbia, has advanced many of the kinds of measures that we're now seeking to incentivize in other parts of Canada. No doubt there will be other provinces who don't wish to be pushed to do more on housing, and that will be their specific choice. But my hope is that if we come together, we realize that the federal government is willing to put billions of dollars on the table in an area that is traditionally within provincial jurisdiction, that there should be something in return other than just paying for the cost of a water pipe. We want to make sure if we're putting money towards infrastructure, cities and provinces are adopting changes that reduce the cost of infrastructure over time. When you build houses where infrastructure already exists, you can actually reduce the cost to local taxpayers through property taxes, and you can reduce development charges on new residents that effectively make it more expensive to build homes. So this is about getting a good return on the investment of Canadians' taxpayers' dollars and getting more homes built more quickly. And my sincere hope is that we can strike a deal with every province and territory.
So there's $1 billion on the table. So it's a $6 billion total announcement. There's $1 billion on the table right away for municipalities to deal with urgent infrastructure needs. And the $5 billion is for the provinces and the territories, and then that moves on to cities and towns if you can't get an agreement there. But Minister, how does that $5 billion get split? Is it strict per capita, or does this go to the municipalities and the provinces with the greatest need who move the farthest on these things?
Well, this is going to be subject to negotiations. My expectation is if we reach a deal with every single province and territory, the amount that each province and territory receives will be roughly a reflection of their share of the population. To the extent that certain provinces don't wish to come to the table and we're forced to deal directly with the communities who are willing to implement some of these changes, perhaps that will be reflected in the overall outcome. But these are decisions that we don't have to take, because I don't want to presume that we're not going to be able to negotiate an agreement with province and territories, when in fact, my sense is the entire world has woken up to the opportunity to help address the housing crisis by making the kinds of changes that we are going to put on the table for discussion as part of these negotiations. And my view is that we should go into this with a sense of hope that we can achieve a deal with provinces in every part of the country.
You've put these conditions on the table for provinces at the very top level to zone as of right up to fourplexes on an individual individual lot. Further down in the announcement, there are conditions here for municipalities who want to get access to a public transit fund to increase their density and lift minimum parking requirements for anybody within 800 meters of high-frequency transit lines, and also post-secondary institutions. When you bundle all of this together, how many new homes, new units do you think all of this money and all of these conditions, if implemented, can help create?
Well, let's not deal in hypotheticals that may exist across Canada. I can tell you where our projections are based on these kinds of changes already being implemented through the cities that have received money through the Housing Accelerator Fund. Most of the cities, and in fact, all of the large cities that we've reached deals with under that particular fund, have agreed to adopt 4 units as of right, have agreed to large density near post-secondary institutions should they have them in their community, have agreed to faster permitting processes. And with 179 agreements, including one with the province of Quebec, we anticipate that over the next decade, there will be an additional 750,000 units permitted for construction over and above what was already projected. So we're dealing with now an opportunity to make changes right across the country. And if we get universal uptake with all of the provinces, we're certainly dealing with hundreds of thousands of additional homes, if not more. This is a huge moment in time for Canada. We have to decide what kind of a country do we want to be. Are we willing to do things differently to make sure everyone in this country has a roof over their head at a price they can actually afford? I think we should be, and we shouldn't be afraid to try big things to solve big problems. I think it's incumbent upon us, those of us who seek elected office, to approach policies with these kinds of solutions in mind.
You say you don't anticipate resistance necessarily from the provinces or an inability to reach agreements, but the last time we spoke, you were having a back and forth with the Ontario Housing Minister Paul Calandra over their affordable housing plans. That $350-odd million was at risk for their inability to meet your standards. Has that been resolved? It's now into the new fiscal year. Has that money lapsed? Are you going to send that to other people, or do you have a deal with Ontario?
First, just I want to be careful to clarify. Though I have, I don't want to presume we can't get to an agreement. I'm sure that there will be some provinces that offer pushback, and there'll be
Sure.
a set of negotiations. But on the specific issue that you mentioned, my most recent piece of correspondence to Minister Calandra offered a conditional approval of the $357 million to Ontario, but the condition would require that they demonstrate how they're actually going to build the affordable housing units that they are bound to build under the agreement that they signed previously, and were given a 1-year extension on. To date, we have not yet had a response from the Government of Ontario to the offer of a conditional approval. My hope, sincerely, was that they were going to take the opportunity to respond, accept the federal money, and then get busy building the houses that they've agreed to build. We will have a decision to take imminently if there is no response from the Government of Ontario regarding this approval, and we'll be sure to keep you apprised of any final decisions that may be taken.
Okay, Minister, one last question, and this has to do with the whole carbon pricing challenge. And the Premier of Nova Scotia, Tim Houston, has bundled together a series of various plans that Nova Scotia has put out on the climate file and have laid it on the table and sent it to the federal government saying, we think this is good enough. This is going to get the emissions reductions that you're looking for nationally and that we're looking for provincially. And this is better than having a carbon price. What's your reaction to what the Premier of Nova Scotia has put on the table? And do you think the Prime Minister should have this first ministers meeting that premiers and the federal opposition are calling for?
So first, I've seen a short summary of what Nova Scotia has proposed, but I haven't yet had the opportunity to dig into the specifics. One of the things that you've got to understand, not just according to me personally, but whether you look at the Supreme Court decision of last year, whether you talk to climate scientists, whether you talk to those who've examined climate policy for their entire lives, most of them will conclude that carbon pricing remains the most effective way to reduce emissions, both across the system and at a household level. To the extent that any province moves forward with a plan that allows people to pollute for free, they're going to be doing it at their own peril, not just to our environment, but in a way that is more expensive than putting a price on pollution and returning those rebates to household. In my home province of Nova Scotia, the average household, when you include the indirect and direct expenses from carbon pricing, will see about $609 charge, which is less than the rebate that they actually receive. The average household will come ahead about $157. Though nobody's getting rich with a check for $157, they are going to be seeing effective climate policy put into place and be left better off at the end of the year. There's a lot of misinformation out about that, but my hope is that the government of Nova Scotia would not insist that it's free to pollute as part of their climate plan. I think a plan that allows pollution to be free is missing perhaps the greatest opportunity to make progress on climate change of the generation.
But you know, Minister, you're putting out these housing proposals that are going to require negotiations and cooperation and agreement with the provinces while they're all pushing back on climate issue, arguing over affordability. There is a tension in the Federation right now. Do you think a meeting on carbon pricing, carbon tax, climate plan at the First Minister's level could help clear the air on some of this and maybe find a common path forward?
There has been tension between the provinces and federal government since Confederation. In fact, the system was designed to bring some of these issues to the fore so they can be debated in public, so we can come to resolutions. My sense is if a First Minister's meeting is being requested to relitigate conversations that have played out over the course of several years, 3 successive federal elections, and only now is coming to debate the same question over and over, I question the utility of such a meeting. If there was to be a conversation about what more can the provinces and federal government do together to reduce pollution and to address affordability concerns, those are conversations I'd always be willing to have. But from what I can tell, it seems that there's a lot of political posturing and very limited engagement in public, at least on the part of the provinces, to demonstrate what they're actually going to do that will be more effective, both from a climate point of view and from an affordability point of view. So to the extent that people want to have conversations, I just hope the focus is on what more good we can do rather than grabbing a political platform to get a video clip.
Housing Minister Sean Fraser, I always appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us today.
The pleasure's mine. Thanks so much, David.